In this first video, I want to go over with you some of the various components of Maya's user interface. We'll be discussing this 3D viewport, the upper region with the menus and the menu sets and shelves, the side regions where the object properties appear when you create things, as well as these panel layouts, shortcuts, and tool shortcuts. And then in the bottom region, we'll discuss what this animation and scripting area is used for. So it's going to be a high-level overview, not getting into too much of the nitty-gritty. But when you first open Maya, it can be a bit overwhelming. The very first thing you need to know is that all these elements can be distilled down to individual properties. So for example, we can remove the UI simply by taking this panel and tearing it out. And now we are just looking and dealing with this particular element, which is called the viewport. So in the viewport, we can have these different views for our objects. We can look with different materials. We can select the wireframe or the back face culling options here. We can change what kind of lighting scheme we want to have, and we can also deselect elements and just show, for example, polygons in our scene. So we don't have anything in our scene right now. But if I go to the Create menu, and I'll tear that off as well. So now that we just have two things, I'm going to put them side by side here. Okay. If I create a polygon cube, for example, in my viewport, I can change whether it's got X-ray. I can create a light, and I can move that light around, and I can use selected light, and I can now see the light bouncing off my sides of my cube. If I change the shading back, you can see that it's being affected by this light. So we could just work in these two windows and use the menus as needed. That's something that just to keep in mind, that you can create things with this drop down and they will appear in your scene. And you can influence lighting as well as shading just by using these upper. I could take wireframe off, just do wireframe. Now I've restored it within the frame of the other UI by clicking this panel layout option, and you can see below this perspective view is a sort of representation of the fore view, which I can manipulate objects in my side and front views as well as my top view. So you'll be using this a lot in this project that we're going to work on. You'll also be using the various modeling menus. I can change my menu set here. In the future you may find this handy, but for now we'll just stay in the modeling menu set. We can create our own custom shelf, which I've done here for modeling purposes, and I've sort of grouped things using these handy little separators, which I could show you how to do. But all these items refer to places in the UI And the extrude tool is here, but I don't want to go digging around for it there, so I just put a menu shortcut here, and I can access the extrude option just like that. So that's very handy and helpful to have these on your shelf as opposed to digging around. So objects themselves have components. So each object has these different inputs. And as I add objects to my scene, I may want to go back and modify them. Well, you can do that as long as you haven't cleared the history of the object. Now over here, you see these numbers. They apply to the actual components that are on the screen at this time. I can hide that if I want by going into the heads up display poly count, and now you see it's gone. I'm going to keep it on screen for now. You can see that it's displaying the verts, the edges, the faces, the tries, and the UV. Well, tries refer to triangles, which is basically the number of faces that can be divided into triangles. So if I just select this object, it's got 38 triangles because the first column is showing the total number of scene elements. So the second one shows the selected, and the third one is actually broken down even further into the individual component. So I've got 21 vertices on this cone, and this cube has 26 vertices, and I've got 26 selected. That's what the last column is. It's the selected amount. So you can see that when I select vertices on one side, it's actually selecting on both. That's because I left the symmetry on in my tool settings. And over here in my tools, I can access the tool settings. I can access it in a number of ways. I can just double click on a tool, and then the tool settings window shows up. Or I could go to display, UI elements, tool settings. We can either just do this and reset the tool. Actually, that doesn't work with symmetry, does it? Well, symmetry exists at the bottom of each tool, so I could be at the move tool, rotate, or scale, and as long as I turn off symmetry, that will now go away, and I can just select the vertices that I want, and it won't influence the object on the opposite axis. So x-axis is what it was set on before. Okay, so that's how to get to the tool settings. We'll just quickly talk about this. This is the animation timeline slider and the animation range slider. So if my timeline and my range slider are the same, the range slider will have no function. But the outer number, if I change that to, let's say, 60, now that's saying, okay, this scene can be 60 frames long, but my workspace will be 24 or whatever I have. I could say 5. So now you can see that this little bar has shrunk down to just showing a range of 1 through 5. If I stretch it out, you see the numbers adjust back to 24, and then you just can move along that range of frames to wherever you want. But now that I've showed you that, I'm going to just show you one other thing, which is hiding this, because we aren't going to be using this hardly at all. We're not going to really talk about animation too much in this lecture. We're going to also hide the command line, and we're just going to keep a very simple setup here. Now the UI itself, you can collapse things, like say you don't want to look at the layers view and you just want to have the full bevy of options in your channel box. You can collapse that layer and just bring it back up. You can move things around for whatever reason. If you want your shelf to be down at the bottom, you can put your shelves down there. You can collapse the tabs and just have buttons, so you can customize however you'd like, but for the purpose of this lecture, I'll just keep the UI in the place where it lives by default. One last thing, if you want to change your viewport background, there's a shortcut, a quick shortcut. It's Alt B. So Alt B cycles through different low contrast and high contrast backgrounds, and then if you want to change this gradient, you can do that by going into Windows, Settings, Preferences, and Color Settings, and 3D Views. So I could mess with my gradient however I wanted to, but I don't want that, so I'm going to reset to saved, and I'm going to close that. And that pretty much covers what I was going to show you as far as the UI goes. We're going to get into talking about these mesh tools in upcoming videos, so I don't want to get too much into modeling tools, but that just is the high level for working in Maya for the first time, what everything that you'll need to know for your building your first project. Those are the basics. So until then, I'll see you in the next video where we'll be covering navigation in 3D space.